"Plant your seed in me," the giant Apache girl said, the lonely rancher. From the top of the highest hill, he could see the entire property. The barn, the corral, the small farmhouse that had been in his family for generations, and the winding dirt road that led to the outside world. Yet, despite the beauty of the landscape, James felt a loneliness that no sunset or open sky could fill. He had learned to live alone, to rely only on himself, and to find comfort in the rhythms of ranch life. Every morning began the same way. He rose before the sun, fed the animals, checked the fences, and walked through the fields. The cows mooed softly as he approached, recognizing his presence, and the horses whinnied, stamping their hooves in greeting. They were his companions, his friends, in a way that people never quite were. Still, when the work was done and the quiet of the evening settled over the ranch, he felt the emptiness in a deeper way. James remembered a time when the ranch had been filled with laughter. His parents had lived here before him, and the house had once been lively with visitors and neighbors. But over the years, most had moved away, seeking lives in towns and cities where opportunities were abundant and company was easy to find. James had stayed, tied to the land not just by duty but by love. The ranch was in his blood, in his hands and his heart. Yet it could not speak back to him, and it could not fill the need for human connection. Sometimes James thought about leaving, imagining what life might be like in a town or a city. But whenever he pictured it, he felt a pang of guilt. This ranch had been his family's life for generations. To leave it would be like turning his back on them, on his own history. So he stayed, and the ranch became both his sanctuary and his prison. He was free in the sense that he could wander the hills and tend to the animals, but he was alone in a way that weighed heavily on his heart. Evenings were the hardest. As the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, James would sit on the porch of his farmhouse, a cup of coffee warming his hands, and watch the world turn quiet. The wind would rustle through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and earth. He would hear the distant howl of a coyote and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was beautiful, yes, but it reminded him that he had no one to share it with, no one to laugh with, to talk to, or to simply sit in silence beside him. Sometimes James would walk down to the old barn where he kept his tools and supplies. He liked the smell of hay and wood and the quiet hum of the farm animals nearby. He would run his hands over the worn beams, remembering the times when he had worked alongside his father, learning the ways of ranch life. His father had been a strong man, patient and kind, with a sense of humor that could light up even the darkest days. But his father had passed away years ago, leaving James to carry on alone. His mother had passed even earlier, leaving a silence in the house that seemed permanent. On the rare occasions when visitors came through the area, James felt a flicker of hope. Travelers, researchers, or families visiting nearby towns would sometimes stop at the ranch to ask for directions, buy a sack of fresh eggs, or simply rest their horses. He enjoyed these moments, brief as they were, because they reminded him that there was a world beyond the ranch. He could see their faces light up when he told stories about the land, the animals, and the history of the ranch. But these encounters were fleeting. They would leave and the silence would return, heavier than before. James had friends in the distant towns, people he had known for years, but visits were rare. Phone calls were few. Life on the ranch demanded constant attention, and the distance made relationships difficult to maintain. He had learned to accept this, to find comfort in the animals, in the work, and in the beauty of the land. Yet he knew something essential was missing. He longed for someone who could understand him, someone who could walk beside him through the fields, share meals at the farmhouse, and laugh at the simple joys of ranch life. One morning, James woke to a particularly golden sunrise. The light spilled over the hills like melted gold, and the air was crisp with the scent of dew. He went about his morning chores with extra care, feeding the animals and checking the fences, but there was a feeling of anticipation in his chest he could not explain. Something felt different. He shook his head, telling himself it was just the quiet magic of the morning, but the feeling lingered. As he walked past the edge of the property near the small creek that wound its way through the ranch, James noticed tracks in the mud. They were fresh, and they did not belong to any of his animals. Curious, he followed them carefully, trying not to disturb the earth. The tracks were large, distinct, and human. He paused for a moment, wondering who might have wandered so close to his home. Visitors were rare this far into the ranch, and strangers even more so. His curiosity was mixed with caution, as he did not know what or who he might find. The tracks led him to the outer pasture, where the sun was just beginning to warm the earth. He scanned the horizon and finally saw a figure in the distance. A woman, tall and strong, was walking along the fence line. She moved with confidence and grace, and there was a calmness about her that seemed to belong to the land itself. James felt a stir in his chest, a mixture of surprise, intrigue, and a long-forgotten sense of hope. He had not expected to see anyone here, not so far from town. She was clearly independent, someone who knew her own mind and could take care of herself. There was a quiet strength in her presence, a way of moving that seemed both gentle and commanding at the same time. James watched her for a moment, feeling an unusual nervousness. He had spoken to travelers before, but there was something different about this woman. She was unfamiliar, yet somehow familiar, as if she belonged in this wide, open land as much as he did. James approached cautiously, unsure of how to start a conversation. He raised a hand in greeting and she turned, her eyes meeting his. There was a moment of silence, an exchange of curiosity and recognition, as if they were both trying to understand what the other was doing there. Then she smiled, a slow and warm smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and confident, carrying over the sound of the wind in the grasses. "Good morning," James replied, his own voice feeling strange in his throat. "I didn't expect anyone out here this early." "It's a good place, though it can be quiet," he chuckled softly, "a little too quiet sometimes." He had spent so many years alone, tending to his ranch, longing for companionship, that it was rare to hear someone acknowledge it without judgment. There was an honesty in her eyes that made him feel seen, as if she understood a part of him he had hidden even from himself. They talked for a while, exchanging stories about the land, the animals, and their lives. James found himself opening up, sharing memories of his parents, of the ranch, and of the quiet struggles of life in isolation. She listened attentively, asking questions and occasionally smiling at his small jokes. For the first time in a long while, James felt a warmth in his heart, a sense of connection that he had thought was lost forever. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the fields, James realized that this encounter might be the beginning of something new. He did not know who she was or why she had come, but for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. The land was still wide, the skies still open, but now he sensed that he might not have to face them alone. He did not yet know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, James felt that the ranch and his heart was ready to welcome someone new. The morning had started quietly, but now, as the sun rose higher in the sky, the ranch seemed to take on a new life. James could not stop thinking about the woman he had met near the creek. There was something about her presence that felt alive, as if the wide-open land itself had recognized her. He went about his chores with unusual energy, checking fences and feeding the animals, yet his mind kept wandering back to her. Later that afternoon, as he repaired a broken section of fence along the edge of the property, he saw her again. She had returned, walking along the far side of the pasture. This time she was carrying a small basket of supplies, her movements steady and confident. James hesitated, unsure whether to call out or wait for her to notice him. Then she spotted him, waved, and began walking toward him, her long strides covering the distance quickly. "Hello again," she said with a warm smile when she reached him. "I hope I'm not intruding. I've been traveling through the area with my family, but I needed a little quiet time alone. This place felt right." It's quiet here, maybe too quiet sometimes. Most people did not understand the rhythm of ranch life, the patience it demanded, and the way the land seemed to speak in its own language. Yet, Ayana seemed to understand without explanation. It was a rare thing, and he found himself wishing she could stay longer. They began walking together along the fence line, talking about small things at first, the weather, the animals, and the hills that stretched toward the horizon. Iana asked questions that showed her curiosity and her respect for the land. "How do you know which areas the cattle like best?" she asked, bending slightly to touch the grass. James smiled. "You watch them, listen to them, and learn from experience. The land tells you things if you pay attention. It's not magic, really, just observation and care." She moved with an ease that suggested she had spent much of her life outdoors, strong in ways he admired. Yet there was also a gentleness in her movements, a softness that made her approachable. He found himself telling small stories about his own childhood, about mornings spent with his father learning to ride horses, about the times he had wandered too far and gotten lost in the hills, only to be found and laughed at. Gianna listened, her eyes attentive and kind. "You must have learned a lot from those experiences," she said. "It sounds like your family taught you to be brave and patient." "I think everyone needs someone to share their life with," she said gently. "Even the strongest people. There's nothing wrong with wanting that." Yana shared stories of her own life, of the Apache traditions she had grown up with, the importance of family, and the lessons taught by elders. James listened with fascination, realizing that there was a whole world he had never known, full of wisdom and practices connected deeply to the earth. "You have a deep connection to your family and your culture," James said, feeling a genuine admiration. "It's something I've missed in my own life, having lost my parents early. This ranch, the animals, your care, it shows resilience and love." Yana watched with interest, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally laughing at his playful interactions with the animals. There was a rhythm to their companionship, a sense that they were discovering something rare and important in each other's company. At one point, they paused near the old oak tree that marked the center of the property. Its wide branches offered shade, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. James leaned against the trunk, feeling the solid strength of the tree beneath his hand. "I've always liked this tree," he said. "It's seen a lot of things over the years and it's still standing strong. Makes you feel connected to something bigger than yourself." Trees like this have wisdom. They've weathered storms and sun, and they continue to grow. They remind us to be patient and resilient. It's refreshing. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the fields, they decided to walk back toward the farmhouse. The sky was painted in oranges, pinks, and purples, and the air was cool and fragrant with the scent of sagebrush. They spoke more casually now, laughing at small jokes, sharing personal reflections, and enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. By the time they reached the farmhouse, James realized that the day had shifted something inside him. The loneliness he had carried for so long had been interrupted, replaced by a sense of hope and curiosity. Yana had entered his life like a sudden breeze, unexpected but refreshing, and he could not help but feel that the encounter was significant, that it might mark the beginning of something important. Yana paused at the edge of the porch. "Thank you for letting me walk with you today," she said, smiling warmly. "It's been a gift to see this land through your eyes." James watched her walk away, her figure tall and confident against the setting sun, and felt a stirring in his heart he had not known in years. There was hope, yes, but also curiosity. Curiosity about who she was, why she had come, and whether their paths would cross again. That night, James sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking out over the fields as the first stars appeared in the sky. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind whispered through the grass. Yet inside him there was a new energy, a sense that the world had shifted slightly, that something important was beginning. Gianna had brought more than companionship. She had brought a glimpse of connection, of understanding, and perhaps even of love. James knew the ranch would still be lonely, the work still hard, but he also knew that life had just become a little brighter. And in that quiet moment, with the stars above and the earth beneath, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he might not have to be alone, where someone could walk beside him, and where the lonely heart of the rancher might finally find its counterpart. The next morning, James woke to the soft glow of sunlight spilling across the farmhouse floor. The memories of the previous day stayed with him, lingering like a warm breeze. He moved through his usual morning routine, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and tending to the fields, but his mind kept returning to Ayana. Her presence had stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years, a sense of connection and possibility that both excited and unnerved him. By late morning, he saw her walking along the edge of the pasture again, her figure tall and confident against the golden light. This time, she carried a small notebook and a pen, as if she had plans to record something. James waved and she smiled, quickening her pace to meet him. "Good morning, James," she said warmly. "I thought I might see you again today." The air was crisp, and the sun sparkled off the dew on the grass. James felt a lightness he hadn't known in years, a joy in simply sharing the quiet of the morning with someone else. He realized how much he had missed this, the presence of another person who could understand the world from his perspective, who could walk beside him and appreciate the same simple beauty he did. As they walked, James noticed Ayana's interest in the land. She paused often, touching the leaves of plants, bending down to examine the soil and asking questions about the animals. She seemed genuinely curious, not just about the ranch itself, but about the life he had built there. "How do you know what the soil needs?" she asked, brushing her fingers through the earth. James smiled. "You learn by watching, by feeling, and by listening. The land tells you its story if you pay attention. You just need to slow down enough to notice it. The land, the people, the animals, they all depend on each other." They reached the creek, where the water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. James knelt and scooped up a handful of water, letting it flow back into the stream. Iana did the same, her movements careful and deliberate. For a moment they were silent, listening to the water, the wind, and the distant call of birds. It was a peaceful silence, one that felt shared rather than empty. Finally, Ayana spoke. "James, can I ask you something personal?" "It's true," he admitted. "I've been alone for a long time. My parents passed when I was young, and I stayed here because this land is my home. It's all I know. But yes, it's lonely. The work keeps me busy, and the animals keep me company, but it's not the same as sharing life with someone else. I think we all need someone to share our lives with, even if we don't always find them. You seem strong and capable, but strong people need companionship too." They sat by the creek for a while, talking about their childhoods and families. James told her stories of growing up on the ranch, of learning to ride horses, and of the lessons his father had taught him about patience, resilience, and respect for the land. He spoke of his mother's gentle guidance, her love of animals, and the small joys they had shared together. Jana listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that encouraged him to share more. Then she told him about her own life, about the Apache traditions she had grown up with, the importance of family, and the lessons learned from elders. She described the ceremonies, the stories passed down through generations, and the way her people viewed the world with reverence and care. James was fascinated. He realized how little he knew about the world beyond the ranch, and yet he felt connected to the wisdom in her stories. There was a natural harmony between them, a sense that they were learning from each other while also enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. As the morning passed into afternoon, they continued their walk, exploring the hills and fields. James showed Ayana the places where wildflowers grew, the patches of earth where the soil was richest, and the areas where the animals preferred to graze. Ayana shared her observations, pointing out subtle changes in the land, the direction of the wind, and the growth of the plants. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, blending knowledge, curiosity, and shared experience. At one point, they came across a small herd of deer near the edge of the property. James motioned for Ayanna to stay quiet, and they watched the deer graze peacefully. "They're cautious," he whispered. "You have to move slowly and respect their space. They'll trust you if you don't frighten them." "I've never seen them up close like this. Thank you for showing me." James offered her a glass of water, and they sat on the porch, watching the colors of the sunset change over the hills. The air was warm, carrying the scent of sagebrush and fresh earth. "I feel like I've known you longer than just a few days," James said quietly. "It's strange how quickly someone can make an impression. There's a kind of connection that doesn't depend on time. Sometimes it just exists, and you notice it when it matters most." For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he was not alone, where someone could walk beside him and share both the work and the quiet moments of life on the ranch. Before leaving, Ayanna looked around the property once more. "This land is special," she said. "It has a spirit, a sense of care in every corner. I can see why it means so much to you." He didn't know what the future held, but he felt certain that she had brought something into his life that he had longed for without realizing it. There was companionship, understanding, and perhaps even the beginnings of love, quietly budding amidst the hills and fields he had called home for so long. That night, James sat again on the porch, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch. The stars sparkled in the sky, and the wind carried the familiar scents of earth and sagebrush. But there was a new energy in the air, a sense of anticipation and possibility. Yana had opened a door in his heart, one he had thought closed forever, and he could not help but wonder where this connection might lead. He knew the ranch would remain challenging, the work still hard and the days long. But now there was a promise of shared experience, of someone to walk beside him through the hills, to laugh with him in quiet moments, and to understand the rhythms of his life. For the first time in years, James allowed himself to feel hope, curiosity, and excitement for what the days ahead might bring. And as he watched the stars, he whispered softly to himself, "Maybe this is the beginning of something real, something worth waiting for." The days that followed were filled with routine work, yet there was a new energy in the air. James and Ayanna continued to meet on the ranch, walking through the fields, tending to the animals and sharing stories about their lives. Their bond was growing, quiet but undeniable. Yet, as much as their connection brought joy, the outside world began to cast shadows over it. One morning, James noticed a group of neighbors approaching the ranch. They were curious about the new visitor, as word of Ayanna's presence had already spread through the small community. Whispers and questions followed them as James greeted the visitors politely, though a sense of tension lingered. He had always been careful about outsiders, wary of gossip and judgment, but this was different. The attention felt intrusive, and he noticed Ayanna's slight unease as she observed the group from a distance. "They're just curious," James said quietly when Ayanna approached him later. "People in these parts aren't used to strangers staying long, especially someone who stands out. They'll get used to it." James felt the familiar weight of isolation creeping back, but now it was mixed with a protective urge toward Ayanna. He could not allow anyone to make her feel unwelcome or unsafe. Meanwhile, Ayanna struggled with her own doubts. She had grown up with strong family traditions and expectations, and she knew that spending so much time with James could raise questions or even disapproval from her family. At night, she would sit by the fire at her temporary camp near the ranch, thinking about the path she had chosen. She did not want to disappoint her family, yet she felt drawn to James and the quiet, strong life he led on the ranch. The tension between her duty and her desire created a storm of emotion that she had to navigate carefully. One afternoon, as they worked together fixing a section of the barn roof, James noticed her silence. Gianna usually spoke with curiosity and insight, but now she moved deliberately, her brow furrowed. "Is something bothering you?" he asked gently. Iana paused, setting down her tools. "I'm just thinking," she admitted, "about my family and the expectations I have to meet. They don't understand why I'm here, why I spend so much time with you. I'm afraid of what they might think. But I'm scared that I might have to choose between my family and being here. I don't want to pressure you, but I also don't want to let fear dictate what could be a meaningful connection." James tried to shield her from it, but he could not control the words that floated through the air. He felt frustration and helplessness, emotions that were foreign to him in his usually solitary life. One evening, after a long day of work, James and Ayanna sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sun sink behind the hills. A cool breeze carried the scent of earth and sagebrush, but the quiet was heavy with unspoken worries. Ayanna looked at James, her eyes full of concern. "Do you think this is too complicated?" she asked quietly. James shook his head. "No, it's not too complicated. Life is rarely simple, and connections like ours are never without challenges. What matters is that we face them together, honestly and patiently. If we choose to face them together, I believe we can find a way." Yana's family called, expressing concern about her prolonged stay. They urged her to return home, citing responsibilities and traditions that she could not ignore. The conversation left her feeling torn, guilty, and uncertain. James could see the struggle in her eyes, the internal conflict between loyalty to her family and the growing attachment she felt toward him and the ranch. "We can figure this out," James said quietly later that evening as they walked through the fields. "I don't want you to feel trapped between your family and this life. We'll find a way that respects both. Life is about compromise, understanding, and patience, and I'm willing to be patient if you are." Yana shared the deep sense of responsibility she felt toward her family and her culture, the fear of disappointing those she loved, and the longing to find a life that was true to herself. Through these conversations, their emotional intimacy grew stronger. They learned to listen without judgment, to provide comfort without overstepping, and to support each other through the uncertainty of life. The ranch became more than just a workplace. It became a sanctuary where they could be honest, vulnerable, and present with one another. One day, while repairing a fence together, a sudden summer storm rolled over the hills. Dark clouds gathered quickly and the wind whipped through the fields. Rain began to fall, first in soft drops, then in sheets that soaked the earth and drenched them both. James shouted over the wind, "We should find shelter." She was fearless, strong, and willing to embrace life fully, even in moments of challenge. Together they ran to the barn, laughing as they slipped and slid in the mud. Inside they shook off the water and caught their breath, sitting side by side on a stack of hay, watching the storm rage outside. "This storm," James said, "is like everything we've faced lately. Unexpected, powerful, and a little scary. But we've made it through, haven't we? And I think we'll get through whatever comes next too, as long as we face it together." It reminded them that connection was not about avoiding difficulty, but about meeting it together with courage and care. By the end of the storm, the air was fresh, the earth smelled clean, and the fields glistened with rain. James and Ayanna stepped outside, walking slowly through the wet grass, their feet sinking slightly into the soft mud. They did not need to speak. The bond they had formed, tested by doubt and strengthened by trust, was evident in every glance, every gesture, every shared moment. That night, as they sat by the fire, drying off and sharing a simple meal, James realized how much he had learned in just a short time. Life was unpredictable, yes, but it was also rich with opportunities for connection, growth, and love. And despite the challenges, he felt more hopeful than he had in years. Iana had shown him that even in a life shaped by isolation and routine, new relationships could bring light, warmth, and meaning. Iana, too, felt a sense of clarity. Though her family's expectations weighed heavily on her, she recognized the importance of following her heart while still respecting her roots. She had found someone who understood her, who accepted her fully, and who shared her appreciation for the land and life. Together, they were learning to navigate the pressures of the outside world, and in doing so, were discovering the strength of their bond. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, James and Ayanna sat in companionable silence. Outside, the stars shone brightly, and the ranch lay quiet once more. The world might be full of challenges, judgments, and difficult choices, but within this small sanctuary of land, animals, and shared moments, they had found trust, understanding, and a connection worth protecting. And in that quiet, reflective night, they both knew that the days ahead would not be easy, but that together they could face whatever came, with courage, patience, and hearts open to the possibilities of love and life. The following morning, the ranch was quiet but alive with the sounds of animals beginning their day. James walked through the fields, checking fences and feeding the horses, but he felt a calm sense of purpose he hadn't known before. The challenges of the past weeks, the judgments, the doubts, and the fears, had tested him, yet they had also strengthened the bond he shared with Ayanna. He realized that their connection was more than fleeting curiosity. It was something deep, meaningful, and worth nurturing. Yana arrived soon after, carrying a small basket of fresh fruit. She greeted James with a warm smile, and for a moment they simply watched the sunrise together, the sky painted in soft hues of orange and pink. There was a peace in these moments, a quiet understanding that despite all the difficulties they had faced, they were in this together. "Good morning," Yana said softly, her voice carrying a gentle strength. "The ranch looks beautiful today. You make it sound magical." They moved in harmony, working side by side, each action a testament to their growing trust and understanding. Later, as they repaired a section of the barn roof together, James paused and looked at Ayanna. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how much this land has shaped me. It's taught me patience, resilience, and care. But it's also shown me that life is richer when shared with someone else. I don't want to face it alone anymore." The sun shone warmly overhead, the wind whispered through the grass, and the animals moved quietly in the background. In that moment, they both understood that their bond had grown into something lasting, built not just on shared interests, but on mutual respect, understanding, and care. As the afternoon approached, Ayanna spoke about her family once more. She had received messages expressing concern and urging her to return home, yet she also felt a deep connection to James and the life they had begun to build together. "I don't want to leave," she admitted, "but I need to find a way to honor my family too. We don't have to choose between them. We can create a life that honors both." James could support her by learning more about her culture and traditions, creating a space on the ranch where she felt respected and understood. It was not an easy solution, but it was one that required patience, compromise, and trust, qualities they had been cultivating all along. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly. The ranch required constant attention, and the tasks were physically demanding, yet they found joy in each other's company. They repaired fences, tended to the animals, planted small gardens, and shared meals. In these simple, everyday actions, they discovered the beauty of partnership, the satisfaction of working together toward common goals, the comfort of shared routines, and the joy of mutual care. One afternoon, as they walked to the old oak tree at the center of the property, James carried a small bag of seeds. He had been thinking about the future, about growth and renewal, and he wanted to mark this moment with a gesture that was both symbolic and meaningful. "I want to plant something here," James said, kneeling beside the tree. "A symbol of new beginnings, of growth, and of the bond we've built." "It feels perfect," she said. "A symbol for all the challenges we've faced and the hope we've found." As they stood and looked at the small mound of earth, a sense of accomplishment and hope filled them both. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection and gentle routines. They continued to work together, share stories, and explore the beauty of the land. Their relationship deepened, built on a foundation of respect, patience, and understanding. They laughed together, comforted each other in moments of doubt, and celebrated the small victories that life on the ranch provided. Yana also began reaching out to her family, sharing letters and messages that explained her experiences, her happiness, and her connection to James and the land. Her family, initially concerned and uncertain, began to understand that her choice to stay was not a rejection of them, but a step toward building a meaningful life. Over time, the tension eased, replaced by cautious support and understanding. James watched this transformation with a quiet sense of pride and relief. He had never imagined that a bond formed under such unexpected circumstances could survive external pressures, cultural expectations, and the weight of past loneliness. Yet here they were, stronger and more connected than ever. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant display of gold and pink, James and Ayana sat together on the porch, sharing a simple meal. The animals were settled and the land was bathed in the soft glow of dusk. James reached for Ayana's hand, holding it gently. "We've come a long way," he said quietly. "From loneliness and doubt to connection and hope. I'm grateful for every moment with you, for your patience, your understanding, and the life we've begun to build together. I feel safe, happy, and alive." As the stars began to appear, twinkling above the vast expanse of the ranch, they sat in companionable silence, knowing that life would continue to bring challenges, but also beauty, connection, and love. They had faced uncertainty, external pressures, and personal doubts, and had come through stronger, more resilient, and more united. The small seeds they had planted beneath the oak tree were a quiet reminder of their journey, a symbol of hope, growth, and the life they were building together. Just as the seeds would take time to sprout and flourish, so too would their relationship continue to grow, nurtured by care, respect, and shared experiences. In that quiet, reflective night, James and Ayana understood that true connection was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together with courage and trust. The ranch, once a place of solitude and quiet longing, had become a home filled with companionship, understanding, and the promise of a shared future. And as the wind whispered through the fields and the stars shone brightly above, they allowed themselves to dream, not just of tomorrow, but of the many days, seasons, and years to come, side by side, planting seeds of hope, love, and life in both the land and their hearts. The ranch had given James a lifetime of lessons, but Ayana had brought him the most important one yet, that even in the quietest, loneliest places, love, trust, and connection could take root and flourish. Together, they had discovered the beauty of partnership, the strength of patience, and the joy of a life shared. And so, beneath the wide Arizona sky, with the fields stretching endlessly and the mountains standing tall in the distance, James and Ayana began a new chapter, one of hope, resilience, and love, knowing that the seeds they had planted would grow alongside them, nurturing a future as vast, beautiful, and enduring as the land itself had neither of them would ever forget.